Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Sotah, Perek Test, Chapter 9, and we're still in the middle of of Mishnah 15. This is the last Mishnah of the Masechta, of the Perek in the Masechta, but as you can see, it's a long one. All right. So continuing with let's call it the downward spiral that the Jewish people kind of go through with the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. Be'ikveis Mashiach. Now, this is already in the period before Mashiach comes. That's what those words mean, Bikvis Mashiach. It could actually be translated as the footsteps of Mashiach, which means you're already coming to a point of time that it's a point in exile where you can hear his footsteps. It's a period before Mashiach comes. Well, that period before Mashiach comes has the potential for lots of problems. Chutzpah Yiskei. Insolence will increase. Okay, there will be this plague of insolence, and that doesn't mean that, and that means people's attitudes, the way people behave, the way people act. V'yoker yamir, expenses will rise. Okay, things will become more expensive. Hagefen titen pirya vayayin b'yoker. The gefen means the vine will give its produce. However, vayayin b'yoker, and still wine will be expensive. Now, if you've got enough grapes, and that means we should have plenty of wine. So then why would the wine be expensive? The answer is, it's bring down in the bottom here, that the people will be drinking so much because they're so bitter and disappointed that they're going to try to find an outlet through drinking, through alcohol, which would be wine in the times of the Mishnah. And because of the big demand for wine, that's what's going to make the wine more expensive. The government will be converted, will change to heresy. And there will be no rebuke. No one will be able to rebuke the other person, because if you do, the other person is going to say to you, who are you to rebuke me? You're no tzaddik either. You're no righteous person either. You do plenty of sins too. Then it continues, and this is an example. It's interesting because some of these examples relate more to the times, to the way things were in the times of the Mishnah. The study hall that was used for studying Torah will be used for harlotry. Now, what does that mean? So the explanation is that the study hall, meaning the places of Torah, will be abandoned. Now, it used to be that the study halls were like outside of the city. In order for the students not to be distracted by the city doings, they were out in the field, so to speak, outside of the outskirts of the city, like no one was. Well, an abandoned building that no one is can sometimes be used by individuals for immoral practices, because it's a place that's kind of been abandoned. There's no one around, and that was the Mishnah saying that can happen when the study halls will now be empty of Torah study. These are areas. Galil, we know, is the northern region of Eretz Yisrael. Gavlan is another part of Eretz Yisrael. And these places will become desolate. So to translate the words, it's V'hagolo yecharav, the Galilee will be laid waste, and the Gavlan will become desolate. Literally translated, it means, and inhabitants of the border will wander about from town to town to search for food. But they will not but no compassion will be shown to them, meaning they'll be desperate, they'll be begging for food, but they won't be giving. It's interesting that, what does it mean, the Anshe Gevul, the people of the border? So they explain that the people of the border means the parts of Eretz Yisrael outside of Yerushalayim. Like Yerushalayim is the center, and everything else is called the border, the people of the border. Everything's a border around Yerushalayim. Those people will wander about, searching for food, but they'll not show compassion. Now, clearly, what does that mean? I mean, it says the people of the border, they're going to be going around from city to city, but we show no compassion. Now, what about Yerushalayim? The people of Yerushalayim won't have to do that? It's only the people around Yerushalayim that are going to have to do that? Not sure what it means. And again, you're going to have many people going around begging, and no one's going to show compassion to them. The Chachma Seifrim Tisrach, the wisdom of the scribes, which means Torah scholars here, will tisrach. That means it'll go bad, it'll decay. No one will have any interest in it. It'll be despised. Those who for a sin will be despised. Truth will be absent, which they explain here to mean the generation will be so corrupt that people of truth will find it necessary to hide from the rest of the population. That's how bad things are going to be. No'arim yalbinu, no'arim pnei zakenim yalbinu. Young people will embarrass the elders. Means yalbinu, they'll make white the face of the elders. Making a person's face white is an expression of embarrassing. The young will embarrass the old. Zakenim yamdu meiktanim. The old people will stand before the younger, the smaller ones. Meaning, even though the smaller ones we just said are going to embarrass them, the elders will still have to stand up because to honor them. Ben menabel av, a son will deride his father. Bas kama be'ama, be'ima, a daughter will rise against her mother. Kala b'chamaisa, a daughter-in-law will rise against her mother-in-law. These means to shame them. Oy ve'ish anshe beisai, a man's enemies will be the members of his household. Pnei adar k'pnei hakelev, the face of the generation will be like the face of a dog. And that means, again, the idea of having no shame. Haben ein mispayish me'aviv, a son will not be embarrassed from his father. That's going to be the situation, a very, very difficult situation. But whom then can we rely upon? On our Father in heaven. When these situations, when things go so bad, who can we? What do we have left to rely on? That is when we have to realize we still have the Rebbeinu Shalom to rely on. Now, the last part of this Mishnah is really, the truth is, if you think about it, even starting from when we started, Reb Pinchas Ben Yair says when the Beis Mikdash was destroyed, they bring down here that some say that this already is not Mishnah anymore. Mm-hmm. It's actually Brisa. It was from a source from Tanoim, not included in the Mishnah. Mm-hmm. However, it's interesting they bring down here that in the Gemara, when the Gemara brings down Mishnah, the Gemara has Mishnah, right? And then you have the Gemara. It brings this down in the Mishnah. Mm-hmm. So although you've got different sources, talking about is this really part of the Mishnah, not really part of the Mishnah, but this last part of Pinchas Ben Yair, this already I bring down here. The following passage is certainly not part of the Mishnah, since it does not appear in any versions of the Mishnah, including the one cited in the Gemara. But somehow or another, it got in. Okay. So it's here, we do it. Okay. Reb Pinchas Ben Yair said, Zerizas mevia l'dei nikiyas. Diligence in observing the laws of the Torah leads one to nikiyas, cleanliness. Cleanliness means someone who is clean from sin. If you're going to be diligent and meticulous, doing the mitzvahs properly and promptly and in an enthusiastic way, then you'll be clean of sin. Unikiyas mevia l'dei tahara. Cleanliness from sin leads to purity. Purity of what? Purity of thought, which they explain from the Tosfos Yantiv. Once a person has succeeded at avoiding sin in practice, he will be able to avoid even thinking of sin. Okay? That's what it means, tahara, purity. But tahara mevia l'dei precious. Purity of thought leads to abstinence. Abstinence here means abstinence from permitted pleasures. Uvrishas mevia l'dei kedusha. And abstinence, meaning staying away even from, limiting permitted pleasures, leads one to holiness. Holiness, they explain, as minimizing even necessary pleasure. The examples they give here is a person who will take upon himself to fast, a person who will make himself a nazar to stay away from wine. All these things are already they're not, so to speak, the extras. They may be considered necessities, especially since wine was a basic drink in times of the Mishnah, but they will abstain even from that. Again, it doesn't mean completely abstain, but it means they're going to minimize their usage of that. Ukadusha mevia l'dei anava. Holiness leads a person to humility. What's the connection? So they explain, once the world and its pleasures become unimportant in one's eyes, that person will be humbled, since he too is part of that world. Humbled in the sense that not making a big deal of himself or his physical existence, making a big part of that, not making a fuss about that, is going to become, once that's your attitude about participating in the world in that kind of way, that these kinds of pleasures are important. So that's going to lead him to humility regarding himself in the sense of his physicality. Va'anava mevia lidei yiras chet. And humility brings one to the fear of sin. Now they explain here on the bottom, again from the Tosfos Yontif, that the fear of sin here is not a fear of punishment, but rather a fear of sin itself, in the sense, again I'll read it to you here, the fear mentioned here is not fear of being punished for sinning, but fear of sin itself. When a person is humble and realizes how small he is compared to the Almighty, right, that's the humility that he has, he understands that all the blessings in his life come from Shemayim, from heaven. Through this knowledge, he develops love for God and becomes awed by his kindness. One who loves God will be appalled by sin, because sin displeases the one whom he loves. So you're talking about a level of staying away from sin, not because of punishment, but out of the fact that if you love Hashem, how would you ever sin against him? The yiras chet mevia lidei chasidus. The fear of sin brings one to chasidus, piety. Now, here again they explain that a chassid, a pious one, serves Hashem not for his own benefit, but to please Hashem. Therefore, he's not satisfied with obeying the basic law, but going beyond the law in order to please his Creator to the best of his ability. Chasidus means to go beyond the letter of the law. You go beyond the letter of the law because you want to please the one you're serving. So that's the Chasidus. The Chasidus mevia lidei ruach hakodesh. And when a person reaches a level of piety that leads to ruach hakodesh, which they translate loosely, I'll call it as divine inspiration. What they explain that is as after perfecting oneself in the ways of piety, one can work on achieving divine inspiration, which is a level of communication from God that is second only to prophecy. Okay, so it's like low frequency communication from Hashem. Okay, it's not prophecy, but it's they're calling it second to that level. Ruach HaKodesh itself has many levels, but in order to come to Ruach HaKodesh, you have to first attain Chasidus. Then it says Ruach HaKodesh revealed the Tchias HaMesim. Ruach HaKodesh brings to the resurrection of the dead. What does that mean? So they explain that to mean one who has reached the level of divine inspiration gains the ability to resurrect the dead, as the prophets Eliyahu and Elisha. This person is so closely connected to God, the source of all life, that he can give life to the dead. So you're talking about, again, we talk about different people having Ruach HaKodesh. There's different levels of that, but the highest level of Ruach HaKodesh can even give you the power to be Mechaya Mesim, to resurrect the dead. Then the last part of the Mishnah not talking about a person who reaches Ruach HaKodesh, his ability to perform Tchias HaMesim, but the last part ends with Tchias HaMesim, and the ultimate Tchias HaMesim of everyone, that will come through Eliyahu, who is remembered for good. Amen. And that's what's brought down here on the bottom. It is stated, it's Pasuk in Malachi, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of Hashem. And this awesome great day of Hashem is talking about the day of Tchias HaMesim, when all those who are to be resurrected will be resurrected. And the verse tells us that Hashem will send Eliyahu to do that. Okay, we have now completed Mishnah Sotah. Mazel Tov. We will now start next Maseches Gittin, and there will not be a Mishnah shift for a couple of days. We will resume again Tuesday morning. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you.